Silent Night, Deadly Night is a film series unlike any other. Starting off as a Santa slasher filled to the brim with childhood trauma and jolly slaying, the movies quickly take a turn and they become weird. Each film slowly reveals its levels of unexpected madness, and they build on each other until they become something truly spectacular. I genuinely enjoyed watching through all 5 of these insane movies, and I'm excited to talk about the pure absurdity that is the Silent Night, Deadly Night quintilogy. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's hop right in. The first film in the series starts off with a family visiting their grandfather in a nursing home. Now, I'm not sure if the grandpa is faking his condition or if he's really in this somewhat vegetative, just non-responsive state, but the moment that the parents leave the room, and it's just our main character Billy and his grandpa alone, the old man suddenly begins to move and act like he's completely fine. He tells Billy a really scary story about Santa Claus and ensures the boy's trauma is securely in place by ending his story with this.
You see Santa Claus tonight? You better run, boy. You better run for your life.
But the moment that the parents come back, the grandpa is suddenly unresponsive again. So, like I said, I don't know if the grandpa's faking it or if this was all just in Billy's head, but the grandpa is never in any of the movies ever again. So, it's really just going to be left as a mystery. On their way home, the family stop on the road and help this man who's dressed as Santa with his car troubles, but Billy is adamant that they shouldn't help Santa because Grandpa's story is still comfortably ingrained inside of his head, and it turns out that the parents should have listened to their son because this Santa has a gun. He wants to rob the family, but when they try to drive off, Santa shoots and kills both of the parents while Billy is watching from the bushes. This ends up leaving Billy and his baby brother Ricky as orphans, and we start the next chapter of Billy's traumatic upbringing. When Billy's a bit older, we start to see his years spent in an orphanage. There's clear signs that the boy is still very terrified of Santa.
Explain this, will you?
I'm sorry, Mother Superior.
Are you? I don't think so.
But you will be.
So the main nun in charge is a lady named Sister Superior, and she decides that it's her mission to cure Billy of his fear, so she punishes him for every little thing that he does. And even worse, she instills in him that punishment is a good thing. One thing that this movie does really well is they set up Billy for his final evolution. Like, a lot of stuff is kind of silly, just a kid being afraid of Santa and getting sent to his room or getting spanked or something like that, but it all does end up coming to a head in the future. Mostly this is a silly slasher film, but I gotta give it a little bit of praise for building up these blocks that do eventually tumble. It's something you don't see in a lot of silly slasher movies. One pretty important moment for Billy is when he peeks into a room and he sees a couple of randy teens just doing the no pants dance. And he gets caught spying by Sister Superior, and he hears as the nun punishes the teenagers just before she comes back, and she punishes Billy as well. Also, at one point, Santa comes into the orphanage, and Billy just decks the guy. Like, he just punches the crap out of him. It's not that important, but it made me laugh. So, here you go. Years later, Billy is all grown up, and he gets a job at a toy store. It's mostly fine. He gets along well with the owner, and he starts to flirt it up with his cute coworker girl, but this small highlight just doesn't last. The owner decides that his store needs its very own Santa, so he decides that Billy is the best guy for the job.
Take a closer look at yourself in the mirror, Billy. And just remember, be jolly. Lots of ho-ho-ho. And try not to scare the little bastards.
Obviously, Billy isn't thrilled with this, but he actually does a decent job. And by that, I mean, he doesn't freak out and start punching people, but he's still a pretty bad Santa.
I don't bring toys to naughty children. I punish them severely.
So finally it's Christmas Eve, and when the store closes, they decide that it's time for their Christmas party. They pour some drinks and sing some Christmas carols, but none that I knew.
Santa's watching, Santa's creeping. Soon you're nodding, now you're sleeping. Were you good for Mom and Dad? Santa knows if you've been bad.
What is important is that this jerk coworker guy takes the cute coworker to the back room for some privacy, and the ever-curious Billy has to follow him back. He watches as the two begin to smooch, and then the jerk guy gets all handsy, and this is the moment where everything finally comes together. Seeing these two makes him remember the time that he spied on the teens in the orphanage, and the words of Sister Superior come to mind, telling him that punishment is good. He's also dressed as Santa, and his personal belief is that Santa gives punishment to people who are naughty. And finally, Billy snaps. He grabs some Christmas lights and hangs the jerk guy, and then he turns to the cute girl, and when she's screaming and saying, "Please don't kill me," and "You're insane for killing this guy," he decides that he needs to cut her open with a box cutter. The boss realizes that things are a bit quiet, so he heads into the back room to see what's going on, and Billy surprises him with the gift of death by smashing a hammer into his head. Then, when the receptionist sees the dead bodies, and when she tries to run from the store, Billy makes Legolas proud and shoots her in the back with an arrow. It's insane how 0 to 100 this movie goes. It's so quick, but it just keeps going from this point. So now, all dressed up as Santa and in a bloodthirsty rage, Billy decides that he's going to continue doing his Santa-ly duties by punishing the naughty people in the neighborhood. So he hits the streets. The first people that he sees are these two bully kids who steal the sleds from these two nerdy kids. And when the bullies sled down the hill, Billy surprises one of them, and let's just say he never fully makes it to the bottom. Billy then finds a random house where the babysitter is smooching with her boyfriend, and that's pretty naughty, so they must be punished. He grabs the babysitter and he mounts her onto the mounted deer head, and then he chucks the boyfriend out the window. But when the little girl wakes up, Billy asks if she's been naughty or nice, and the girl insists that she's been nice. So Billy takes out his box cutter and he gives it to the little girl. A nice little gift of a murder weapon. It's so funny. I don't remember exactly when he realizes this, but at one point Billy decides that Sister Superior is the most naughty person that he knows, so he starts to head towards the orphanage to give some good old gifts of punishment. Also at this point, the cops are aware that there's a killer Santa on the loose, so we get a pretty funny interaction as they see a Santa breaking into a window. They rush inside with their guns drawn, but it turns out that it's just a regular dad that was trying to surprise his daughter, and now she's super traumatized. It's the gift that keeps on giving, right? Just scar your children for life on Christmas Day. It's the gift that keeps on giving. The police eventually learn who Billy is, and they learn that he lived in the orphanage, so they head there, and it's just in time because they see a Santa just as he's approaching the children. One cop yells for the man to stop, but when he doesn't listen, the cop shoots and kills the Santa right in front of the kids. Also, this kid is Ricky. He's Billy's younger brother. Not super important yet. Eventually quite important, though. Well, it turns out that the shot Santa wasn't Billy at all, and it was actually a dude who worked in the orphanage named Father O'Brien, and he was deaf, so he couldn't hear the cop shouting. So oopsie, oopsie daisy, the cop killed Santa in front of all the kids. Oopsie, my bad. The cop still sticks around even after killing the guy. Like, there's no protocol for him to leave. He just stays at the orphanage waiting for Billy to eventually show up. And when Billy finally does show up, he catches the cop off guard and he just axes him in the stomach and he falls down some stairs and now he's dead. Then Billy heads inside the orphanage to kill Sister Superior, and just as he raises his axe to do the job, even more cops arrive and they shoot him multiple times. So just think, these poor kids, dude, these poor kids in a matter of like 15 minutes, the cops have shown up and killed Santa right in front of them twice. Like, there's no way any of them are walking away from this unaffected, right? They are screwed up. Christmas comes around, all of these kids are just in straitjackets and in white padded rooms, just rocking back and forth. The movie ends by showing us Ricky again as he's looking down at his dead older brother, and then he declares this.
Naughty.
This does lead us right into the second film, but before we get to that, let's rate this one. I think all in all, Silent Night, Deadly Night was a decent slasher film. Like, it had some fun holiday cheer-filled deaths, and the character development of Billy was really well done. It did have some just silly moments, but nothing that even touches the insanity that the sequels give us. But really, I'd say that it was a pretty good 80s movie. I don't have anything that I really hated, and I don't have anything that I really loved that like took this movie to the moon or anything like that. So I think we're just gonna put this like flat in the middle, maybe a little under the exact middle bar. I'm thinking something like 2 out of 5 super killer deadly Santas. I think that's good. Silent Night, Deadly Night Part 2 is probably one of the most well-known movies in this entire series. Like, it's incredibly campy. It's got some super stupid, silly, over-the-top, just wonderful moments. And the thing that I think it's the most known for is the fact that it copy and pastes the first movie for the first 45 minutes of the sequel. I think within the first 45 minutes, probably 43 minutes of that time is the first movie, like, purely. There's like 2 minutes of little filler bits that they kind of interrupt it with. The rest of it is just the first movie. And then it changes, it goes into its own thing, but it's crazy how much of the first film is in the second film. And me and my buddy watched these back to back, and we were both going absolutely crazy because we decided we wanted to experience these movies in their fullest, all in a row. And these two movies in particular were so hard to watch together because we just watched the first one and now we get to rewatch the first one. It was man, it was wild. But this movie was still wonderful. So, as it was hinted at, Part 2 focuses on Billy's younger brother Ricky, but he's all grown up now and he's being interviewed by this therapist. And as the interview goes on, Ricky recalls the events of the first film, and that's where the copy-paste of the first film comes from. It's a really blatant padding for time, because there's a lot of things that Ricky just couldn't possibly know. You know, like, Ricky wasn't there when Billy was getting spanked, or when Billy was peeking in on the two randy teenagers, or when the cops went in to confront the not Billy Santa guy and completely scarred that girl. Like, he remembers everything that happened, every single kill, every single thought that was in Billy's head, so it just couldn't possibly be.
How could you possibly remember all that?
Because I was there.
Wrong!
But it's easy for me to forgive this film because Ricky himself is such a treat. This dude is the most annoying, sarcastic, full of himself character that I've ever seen in a movie. The way that he talks, it's so whiny and pretentious and know-it-all. Everything he says was just my favorite thing. And like, I wanted to include every line that I possibly could, so here you go.
I feel sorry for you. Going too fast for you, Doc? Red car. Good point. I don't sleep. Really? Well, maybe we're just jerking off here then. Huh?
What do you see out there?
Bars. You're good, Doc. But I know all the moves. I could squash you like a bug. So, this is me, huh?
Who did it?
Santa Claus. I've never told anybody this before. Let it out. Here it comes.
So we've talked about the first half of this movie. It's just a recap, But then it gets into something new, so let's start talking about that. It's kind of strange because at first it makes Ricky seem like he's maybe going to be a kind of anti-hero. Like when he's a kid, he starts having these PTSD moments whenever he sees a nun or whenever he sees the color red. Like the color red kind of triggers his traumatic Santa experience. His first kill is on this one dude who's being way too handsy with a girl who don't want to be handsy. You don't do that. But he gets in the guy's Jeep and he backs over him over and over and over, and then here's the lady's response.
Thank you.
I know he was a bad dude. He probably deserves to die, but saying thank you after just seeing someone brutally murdered is insane to me. The next kill that we see is this money launderer guy who's bullying one of the bookies that owes him some money. People who owe money are called bookies, right? Is that right? Is it bookie? I'm not going to look it up. I'm just going to assume I'm right, and we can keep going. Anyway, he kills the money launderer guy by shoving an umbrella through him, and then it's wonderful. You know, it's gotta rain. It's gotta rain, and it reminded me a lot of Resident Evil, of Umbrella Corporation. I don't know, like, totally copied this movie. Resident Evil copied Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, everybody. At one point, Ricky falls in love with a girl. I don't remember her name. She's gonna be girlfriend for now, and she's not sticking around for long, all right? The next kill that Ricky has is actually a very well-deserved kill. Ricky and girlfriend are going to the movies. They're going to see this Killer Santa movie, and seeing the Killer Santa on screen makes Ricky go ballistic, and he goes to the back row where this one dude is just being annoying and yelling and interrupting the movie. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun. And he beats the crap out of the guy, and presumably he kills him as well.
Naughty.
Ricky's relationship does fall apart, like I said, pretty quickly once girlfriend's ex-boyfriend shows up, and he's a jerk, and Ricky doesn't handle the situation very well. He doesn't use his words. Girlfriend actually reacts pretty realistically in this situation. She screams and she calls Ricky a murderer. And then she makes an actual gulp sound. It's so funny. Uh-oh. And when she tries to run away, Ricky decides that she's also being naughty, so he takes the antenna off of the car and he strangles her to death. A cop sees all of this happen and he goes to try and arrest Ricky, but he gets way too close with his gun. And Ricky uses his super fast lightning reflexes and turns the gun on the cop and shoots him. And now Ricky's got a gun. This next little bit is fairly notorious. It's where Ricky is going on a rampage. There's a few absolutely wonderful deaths. This dude gets shot after he's just walking outside to see what's going on. And then they have this stunt when Ricky shoots a car. And look how close the car gets to hitting that stuntman. Oh my god! It's in this movie. It's crazy that this is in Silent Night, Deadly Night 2. Like, this guy could have really gotten hurt. It's a good stunt. And then, probably the best part, maybe in the entire movie, is this kill and this line in particular.
Garbage day! Huh? No!
The whole rampage comes to an end when a group of cops stop Ricky, and he ends up putting the gun up to his head, and...
No more bullets. Young and stupid.
So now we're finally all caught up with present-day Ricky, and we see what's up with the interview. And Ricky killed the interviewer. and now he escapes the asylum or the prison or whatever he's in, and it's time for Ricky Rampage 2. Just like older brother Billy, Ricky decides that Sister Superior is the reason for all of his torment, so Ricky wants to find and kill the old nun. But in order to do that, he has to look up her address in a phone booth, and while he's looking it up, he hears this Santa guy dinging a bell and asking for donations, and we don't see the kill, but when Ricky walks out of the phone booth, we see the dead Santa guy, and Ricky is also now dressed to the nines in a Santa outfit. He bashes down Sister Superior's door, and also, she lives in 666. Of course she does, right? Of course she's got to live in 666. But Ricky ends up chasing her through her house, and she's in a wheelchair, but this chase scene goes on so long, and my favorite part of it is Ricky is about to swing down on her, and she jumps out of her chair, and she falls down the stairs, and Ricky's axe gets stuck in her wheelchair, and then at the bottom of the stairs, she's got another wheelchair just waiting for her. It was so funny. And then Ricky does end up just cornering her like 2 seconds later, and he swings his axe down on her, and then we don't see exactly what happens, but a few minutes later, we follow these cops as they go into Sister Superior's house, and oddly enough, Sister Superior looks just fine. But then, when they touch her, her head falls off. Like, Ricky was able to put her head back onto her body. There's no blood anywhere. He was able to just, like, perfectly balance her. And then the second they touch her, the head just falls off. Where's the blood? Where's the blood, man? Ricky then jumps out and tries to kill the nun that's with the cops and the cops as well. But they just end up shooting him, like, a whole lot. And he falls down, and now he's dead. But this movie also starts another trend that all of the movies do, which is the fake-out final scene. Right? So, just as the credits are about to roll, Ricky opens his eyes, and then we get this knife stab, and it's like, oh, maybe he's actually alive, and then the next movie just doesn't really continue where this one left off. So, whatever. I don't know how to fairly rate this movie, because half of it is just the first film, right? But I feel like I enjoyed this one more than I enjoyed the first. Like, I loved Ricky. I laughed at pretty much everything that he said, and the story was stupid, but in the best kind of ways, so here's what we're gonna do, alright? We're gonna copy the score from the first film, and we're gonna paste it just like the movie did. And then we're gonna add another Santa on top of that, because I want to. This one's 3 out of 5 Santas. This one was a fun one. The third movie is where we really start to amp up the crazy factor. This one stars a blind girl named Laura, as well as a now fully comatose Ricky, who had his brain rebuilt, and he now has to wear it in a jar on the top of his head. And that's not all, because Laura is a psychic. That's right. Silent Night, Deadly Night is starting to take a turn, but it gets even crazier in later movies. This is like the surface level of madness. It's just escalating from here, all right? So Laura is doing this experiment where the doctor is trying to get her and Ricky's brains all synced up on the same wavelength. I'm not sure why, but being synced with a mass murderer it's not great for Laura. So she starts to have weird visions of Ricky's memories, and it was so funny because at one point she sits on Santa's lap and she starts asking for things, but she's a fully grown woman, and it's like she's a little kid just asking for stuff.
I want a Barbie doll and a bicycle and roller skates and ballet shoes and a Mickey Mouse watch and a doll.
When Laura leaves the hospital, she sees a vision of the receptionist with her throat sliced, but then she wakes up from the vision, and I'm sure everything's gonna be a-okay. Laura's brother Chris picks her up, and then we get introduced to Chris's girlfriend, Jerry, as well. And Laura is immediately just savage to her. Like, she instantly just chooses violence. She wants to be the worst person that she possibly can be to Jerry.
Chris tells me you're psychic.
Chris tells me you give great head.
Laura and the other two are heading to their grandmother's house for the holidays, but we cut back to the hospital and uh-oh, Ricky's woken up. He immediately begins his killing spree by taking out this drunk Santa dude and then cutting the throat of the receptionist, just like Laura saw in her vision. It's all coming together. I mean, it's just starting, but it might all come together. Ooh. Oh yeah, also, the drunk Santa dude that Ricky killed first, he goes into Ricky's room while he's still in a coma, and he just starts, like, making fun of him. He just starts making all these coma jokes for some reason. I don't know, it was funny, I guess.
Hey, Ricky. Want a drink? What's that? Vegetables don't drink? Hey, Vegetable. Who's your favorite singer? Perry Coma?
So Ricky and Laura are still connected, and he can see into Laura's memories and her current surroundings. So he hears Chris and Jerry and Laura say that they're all heading to the grandma's house, and he also hears the directions that they're going to take to get there, so he knows where they're going and he knows how to get there. Ricky starts off by hitchhiking, but he's still got that thing where whenever he sees something red, he has to kill. So when the driver pulls out a red handkerchief, Ricky kills the man and steals his clothes and steals his car. And then Ricky makes it to the grandma's house way before Laura and the others somehow. And he and Granny have some nice little small talk. They have a cute little moment, but Ricky ends up snapping and he ends up killing the grandma, but we'll see her still in a little while. So sometime later, Laura and the other two show up, and after a while, they think that it's strange that the grandma isn't there, but they figure that she must have just gone to the store or is visiting the neighbors or something, even though the stove was left on, whatever. Just forget about that. Grandma's gone, and it's nothing to worry about yet. And so Chris and Jerry immediately decide that they need to take a bath. And this scene has nothing to do with anything. Like, it doesn't end up in a death. But holy crap, dude. Look at this. Look at this. Freaking Chris is wearing a whole Chewbacca cosplay underneath his t-shirt, dude. Holy crap, man. Anyway, in the meantime, the main doctor guy ends up teaming up with a detective to go and find the missing Ricky, and the doctor believes that he's going to try and find Laura somehow. And then between these two, most of their scenes, it's pure filler. It's the worst part of the movie. It's the part that seems to drag on, and they always just have to cut to it for a little while. But I'm just going to address exactly what happens right now. We're not going to be cutting back and forth. So they have to try and find out exactly where Laura's grandma lives. And to do that, the detective gets on his car cell phone. And I don't know if this movie was sponsored by automobile cell phones, but this dude talks for like 3 minutes straight about this car phone. And he talks about it like it's the bee's knees. It's the hottest thing in existence. He just keeps going on about how cool it is to have it and how everyone's going to need to have a car cell phone someday. And I don't know if they were trying to do something for comedy or, like I said, if it was a sponsored deal, but it went on for way too long for it to just be nothing. So I don't know what's going on there. Anyway, the doctor and the detective end up having a pretty big disagreement on how to handle Ricky. The doctor still wants to try and save him. Like, he's not convinced that Ricky is evil anymore because they rebuilt his brain, so he thinks he's kind of a new person who maybe deserves a second chance, something along those lines. And the detective's just like, dude, this guy's a killer. He says that he was there during the events of the second film when Ricky died. And so he's like, no, this dude's a big time a killer. We gotta put him down the second we see him. So they have this big disagreement, and the detective pulls over to take a piss. And when he does, the doctor steals his car and drives it to Granny's house. And that's all of their scenes. Like we see a little bit more of them when they converge with the main group, but we're not going to be cutting back to these two. All right. So back to the main group, Chris and Jerry go for a walk for a minute, and this part, it was so stupid, but it got me, all right? It made me laugh. Chris goes to hide from Jerry for a second, and she's like, hey, you better not scare me. You know I don't like when you scare me. If you scare me, I'm going to be so mad. And then she walks around the corner and Chris jumps out and tries to jump scare her. And that's the whole scene. The scene ends. It was so stupid, but it got me pretty good for whatever reason.
I don't like it, okay? Chris?
When they're going back to the house, they realize that their car is gone. So apparently Ricky has stolen their car, and they go inside, and while they're conversing, all of a sudden, Ricky punches through the door and grabs Jerry around the neck, and he's not letting go. They do everything that they can to try and pry his arm away, and it only ends up working when Chris grabs a kitchen knife and stabs it into Ricky's arm, which just forces him to let go. But now he's also got a knife. Chris ends up going upstairs and he comes back down with his grandfather's shotgun, so they're armed and ready, and they decide that they just need to make a break for it. So they all three end up walking outside, and then out of nowhere, Ricky drops from a tree and starts attacking Chris. He makes Chris drop the gun immediately, and then, while Chris is on the ground, Ricky grabs that knife and he stabs Chris in the neck, and Chris is dead now. Laura and Jerry run back inside, but Ricky doesn't follow them because all of a sudden the doctor drives up just then. He gets out of the car and he starts playing some of the sessions that he was doing with Laura for Ricky. And this causes Ricky to kind of go into a bit of a neutral trance. They start getting a little bit closer together, and the doctor reaches out, and Ricky and the doctor grab hands for a very serene moment. And then Ricky brutally murders the doctor. Like, I don't know what he thought was going to happen, man, but duh, the mass murder guy killed the doctor. So now Laura and Jerry are hiding in one of the upstairs bedrooms, and Laura mentions that the grandpa used to keep a gun underneath the mattress, but she's not sure which mattress it was. So they check the one that they're hiding next to, and it's not there, and then Jerry goes off to check the other mattresses in the upstairs bedrooms. And while she's looking, she gets grabbed by Ricky and killed. And so now it's just Laura alone. And she's wandering through the rooms trying to find out where Jerry went. And she sits on the bed and Jerry's dead next to her. And she feels the dead body of Jerry. And she realizes that now she's alone. But then her powers kind of kick in. She realizes that Ricky is in the same room as her. And she tries to kind of talk to him and have a moment. But then she reaches up and she touches him, like she didn't know who he was, but when she feels who he is, she runs away because he's trying to kill her. Like, she knows that. I don't know what her powers were doing to her there, but Laura ends up running and hiding in the basement, and this is where we see the grandma again. So Granny manifests to Laura, and she does this whole spiel about how Laura isn't using her powers properly, and how she's not paying attention to them, and she's not allowing them to enter her mind. And then she says that the only way that she could possibly survive this situation is to use her powers to defeat Ricky. And then the vision goes away, and Laura ends up finding the dead grandma's body just hanging there. So grandma is definitely dead and was using some of her psychic abilities to talk to Laura, and she gave her some advice, and then Laura ignores that advice and doesn't use her powers at all. The powers don't make another appearance in this movie. That's the end of it. That's the end of the powers. So what Laura does do is she breaks the light in the basement, and she says, "Now we're even, now we're even, Ricky. Now you definitely can't beat me." But I don't know, man. I never got the sense that Ricky was using any of his real senses. I always felt like he was in this trance by the psychic powers to try and find and kill Laura. And the lights off, I just don't think would make much of a difference. And I'm right, because they don't. Because now Laura and Ricky start getting into a little bit of a fight, and Laura loses. She loses big time, and she's just about to be killed by Ricky when Chris shows back up, and I lied to you, and he's not actually dead. That's right. He shoots Ricky in the chest with his shotgun, but that doesn't stop Ricky. Ricky falls down, and then the gun jams. And so Ricky seizes this moment, and he chokes Chris out, and he almost kills him again. And now Chris isn't in this movie again. He's not dead, but he's not in this movie again. So Ricky starts beating up Laura again, but then she falls down and she's got this pokey stick, and then Ricky trips and he falls and gets impaled, and now he's dead. That's it. It's so anticlimactic. A bit later, the detective finally shows up, and we hear the EMTs say that they've got Chris's body and that he's not dead, and they're taking him to the hospital, so he'll probably be okay. And then the cop and Laura share a small moment, and she says, "Merry Christmas." And then just before the movie ends, like I said with the previous one, we got that standard to set, so slight false ending here.
Merry Christmas.
And a happy new year.
I liked this movie, but I wouldn't say that I loved it. It was the first movie in the series where they started to mess around with being kind of weird, like with the brain in the jar and then the psychic premise, but they weren't really capitalizing on it the way that I would have really enjoyed. It did have quite a bit of filler as well with the detective and the doctor that was pretty boring, in all honesty, but I will say mostly it was just silly and it focused around Ricky and Laura, so the boring moments never lasted too long. That being said, I think I still liked the second one just a bit more than this one, so I think I'm going to put this at the same level as the first movie with 2 out of 5 Santas. So still, not terrible, but definitely not my favorite in the series. Now, are you ready? Because the fourth movie, man, this one really takes off. I love this film. It was directed by Brian Usna, which is the man behind the Reanimator films, which are some of my all-time favorites, as well as an amazing body horror mystery movie called Society. So my expectations for this movie were pretty high once I found that out, and I will say it delivered. This one's pretty good. It opens with a girl falling from a rooftop while she's also on fire, and the only witness who sees what really happened is this homeless dude who is Ricky in this movie. He's definitely the same character, but he's also definitely not the same Ricky that we've been following the last 2 movies. Like, his head's not in a jar, he's not a homicidal maniac, he's just a kind of crazy homeless dude in this movie. So, our main character is a reporter named Kim, and she's assigned to work the case of the girl who just died after apparently spontaneously combusting. The girl died just outside of a bookshop, so Kim starts there, and we meet Fema, the bookstore owner. Kim and Fema chit-chat, and they plant the seeds of friendship, and before she leaves, Fema gives Kim a free book for an odd religion, as well as a date.
Why don't you come to our picnic tomorrow? I'll write down the address.
While Kim's kind of snooping around, she talks to this butcher guy, and he's supposed to be speaking in really broken, bad English, but instead he's just speaking like how Kevin in The Office spoke when he was just trying to do lazy talk. Like, this guy can clearly speak English really, really well.
She burned. Scorched real good. Nothing left. Waste out.
So me think, why waste time? Say lot word when few word do trick.
So, also, right out the gate, this movie starts to get strange. After her encounter with Fema, Kim starts to notice the shapes of faces watching her from multiple places, and sometimes they also have the shapes of hands reaching out that seem to be wanting to grab her. It's this constant cluing in that something or someone is watching her and is interested in her story in particular. And we're not sure why, but as this mystery continues, it fills in all the blanks. Kim heads up to the rooftop to see where the woman jumped from. She sees Ricky and she tries asking him some questions, but he's not really responsive to what she's saying. He does seem to be interested in Kim, but not in any of her questions. While she's asking, he gets distracted by this air vent. We hear some chirping coming from it. And Ricky reaches inside of the vent and he pulls out this giant larva. He starts to offer it to Kim and she does the smart thing and she runs away. She gets off the roof and she runs back home to her apartment. But I told you, this movie starts to get weird, and it starts to get weird quick, and then it just keeps getting weirder. It's a good one. So Kim goes home and she starts to read through the book that Fima gave her, and this is where that shape comes in, that spiral shape. It turns out that this is the shape that represents the power of womanhood, but not symbolically. They mean literally. This symbol means that whoever sees it and whoever embraces it earns some kind of power that only women can get. So yeah, that's the direction that this movie's going. Inside the book, Kim also learns about this demon lady named Lilith, who had the bottom half of her body completely engulfed in flames, just like the dead girl that we saw at the beginning of the movie. Kim also starts to notice that spiral shape kind of everywhere, and bugs everywhere. Like in her food, manifesting in her hands. Sometimes she hallucinates bugs. Like, we're not sure if the bugs are actually there or if it's just something that she's seeing. They're just everywhere. Kim goes over to her boyfriend's parents' house for dinner one night, and she just meets his family. These people aren't super important, but they do come up a bit later, so I just wanted to mention them now. Especially, and specifically, the younger brother Lonnie. We'll see more of him a little bit later. The next day, Kim meets Fima and some of her friends for an afternoon lunch in the park. They talk a bit about the book that Kim was reading, and we learn that all of the women here are part of a cult that believes women have a certain power and that they are all trying to unlock that power. The friends go off, but Kim has had a bit too much wine, so she just lays back and chills with Fima, and this is where we see some of that face imagery pop up and some of the things showing that everything isn't as it seems. Fima also gets really close. She starts coaxing Kim and trying to be really friendly, and it ends up getting a little bit intimate, and they share a kiss. When Kim goes home, she's not feeling 100%, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, a giant cockroach begins to rampage through her apartment. But Kim can't even deal with it because she suddenly feels really, really sick. She runs to the bathroom and locks the door behind her to keep the cockroach out. Pretty smart. But when she vomits, she throws up bugs. And I'm not going to be able to show this, so, imagine. She's throwing up bugs. It's gross. She's not having a great time. And then she passes out. When Kim comes to the next morning, she isn't sure if what she saw was real or if she was just really drunk and hallucinating. But she knows who might have some answers. She heads back to Fima's place, and we do get a little bit of an explanation. Fima says that she misses her daughter, who was named Lily. But Lily wasn't strong enough to control the power that they unlocked inside of her. It was all too much, and she ended up bursting into flames and falling from the top of the roof. So she was the girl that we saw at the beginning. And now Fima is looking for a replacement. She says that she misses her daughter, and she just wants her daughter back. But not only that, she also wants a replacement for the conduit of power that she now knows is out there, and she hints that she wants Kim to become that replacement. Kim ends up drinking a cup of tea, and she suddenly becomes very drowsy. She closes her eyes, and when she opens them again, all of the ladies from the lunch and Ricky are standing above her and chanting. They draw a line on her face and a spiral around her stomach, and then Ricky comes in with the giant larva that we saw before. They place the larva onto Kim's stomach, and as they chant, it enters her skin. They then order Kim to manifest her fear and expel it from her, and I guess that means literally, because suddenly Kim throws up a giant, long cockroach bug thing. The cultists then grab the bug and cut it open and pour its inner goop all over Kim's face. And then Kim wakes up. But she's still in Fima's place, and when she tries to leave, all of the cult members show up again and try to stop her and say that they're not done yet, and Kim needs to continue or else there will be consequences, and Kim gets out of there. I told you these movies got weird, and I bet you didn't see this coming now, did you? Freaking giant bug cult in the middle of a Santa slasher series. It's the most unexpected possibility out there, I gotta say. As Kim is running home, Fima sends Ricky after her and says that he needs to get her back so that they can finish their ritual. And that night, Ricky enters Kim's apartment, and, the boyfriend isn't happy about this, so they start to fight, and Ricky ends up getting a knife, and the boyfriend doesn't last too long. Ricky kills the boyfriend pretty quickly. It's actually a pretty hectic fight, all in all. Like, it was hard to see where the choreography was, which I think is pretty cool. It was a very real fight because it's just them brawling and sprawling around on the ground half the time. It was pretty cool. But then Ricky grabs Kim and he drags her out of the apartment and locks her inside of a meat freezer. The cult members then show up and they begin to chant and call for Kim's metamorphosis and her rebirth. And while she's freaking out, Kim notices her hands begin to elongate and transform. And then they grow together and start squawking at her. And Kim jumps backwards, and then the same thing starts happening with her feet and her legs. And they start curling up. And eventually, Kim's entire body is covered with this transformation goop. And it doesn't go away until the next morning when she finally wakes up and she sheds some of that skin off of her as if she's coming out of a cocoon. Once that's all done, Kim is allowed to leave without question, and she goes to see Fima again. When she does, Fima calls Kim Lily, but Kim is still hesitant to join in the cult, which I mean makes total sense, right? Like, they did kidnap her and kill her boyfriend, and it's all bug-centric, so I don't blame her. The cult definitely needs to work on their recruitment process a little bit. I don't blame her at all, man. Anyway, Fima says that to finalize her transformation into her new power, Kim needs to sacrifice the life of another man. And Fima has chosen this other man to be Lonnie, her boyfriend's younger brother that we saw earlier. That's the guy who I said we were coming back to. So she orders Kim to go and kidnap Lonnie, and Kim says, "There's no way I'm gonna do that." And then she runs away, and Ricky chases after her again. Kim ends up running into a hotel room and locking the door, and then her transformation starts again, but this time it's more painful, it's more out of her control. Her hands start to do the weird elongating and bendy thing, and then all of a sudden her lower half starts to get really hot and it starts to burst into flames, and Kim is forced to jump into the shower so that she doesn't burn alive. She finally ends up screaming for help and telling Ricky that she'll do anything to make it stop. And Ricky says the only way for that to happen is if she does what Fima says. And without really a choice, Kim says okay. And once she says okay, the fire stops burning her, and now her path is set in stone. She and Ricky go over to her dead boyfriend's house and they kidnap Lonnie, but Ricky makes things so much worse. He's got to, right? He goes in and he ends up accidentally knocking both of the parents out and setting the house on fire. So now the parents are dead and Lonnie's an orphan. No! Kim and Ricky take Lonnie up to the roof where all of the cult members are waiting. But when Kim is instructed to kill Lonnie, she stops and she hesitates and she says that she can't do it. And then she stabs her knife into Fima's stomach. Now, this causes her power that's inside of her to go wild again because she's not doing what Fima said. So she's starting to burst into flames and her hands immediately merge together. In a final desperate move, Kim takes both of her hands and shoves them into Fima's stomach, stabbing her as well as catching Fima on fire and I think transferring all of her power into Fima as well. So now Fima has this unstable power inside of her, and Fima bursts into flames, and just like her daughter did, she falls off of the rooftop and she dies. Kim grabs Lonnie and they run away and they get away from the cult, and that's where the movie ends. I told you, this one was wild. This movie it's so freaking crazy, and I didn't expect to find this kind of film in the middle of the Silent Night, Deadly Night movie series. Like, I think it's easy to say that I absolutely love this one. I love body horror, and it was a great mystery with constant buildups and questions. The only thing that I didn't really like is that this is a Silent Night, Deadly Night movie, right? Like, this has very little to do with Christmas or Santa or anything of that nature, and it was fairly clear that this script was just slapped with the Silent Night, Deadly Night name at the last minute, but still, I mean, I still loved it. I'm still gonna give it a rating of 5 out of 5 killer bugs with Santa hats because there's no Santas in this movie, so it's gonna be bugs instead. But this one's still definitely a favorite of mine. It was a great movie. We finally made it to the 5th and final movie, and what a ride we've all endured. It's been a true journey, and I'm happy to say that the 5th Silent Night, Deadly Night does not disappoint. This movie focuses on a boy named Derek and his mother Sarah. His father is in it as well, but the movie opens with this mystery gift being delivered to the house, and when the father opens it up, the toy inside comes to life and wraps its arms around the dad's face until eventually he falls and a fire poker goes straight through his head and he dies. So the dad's not really part of this movie, but the killer toys are, so that's good. So now that the dad has died, Derek doesn't talk anymore, and the mom is desperate to try and find a way to cheer him up, so she takes him to the toy store to try and get him something special. We meet the store owner, a man named Pedo, and his son, Pino. We also see this dude seemingly stalking Derek and Sarah, and it turns out that Derek doesn't want a toy, and instead the strange man ends up buying a Larry the Larva toy and taking it back to his hotel room. Unfortunately for the strange man, his check bounces, so the hotel manager is about to kick him out, but he stops when the man bribes him to let him stay for a bit longer by giving him a toy for his kid, and of course he ends up giving him the Larry the Larva toy. While the manager is driving home, the larva comes to life, and it attacks him, and it ends up burrowing inside of him and popping out his eyeballs, and then the car crashes and explodes, and it was all pretty rad. It was a cool death. Another mystery gift then shows up at Derek's front door, but Derek recognizes the wrapping paper, and he associates it with his dad's death. And Sarah, the mom, isn't sure who it's from. She suspects it's from her neighbor, and knock, 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 who's that at the door? It's the neighbor, Kim! Yeah, the same Kim from the previous movie. And Lonnie is there too. This movie isn't about them really at all, but I thought it was a really fun way to give us a small continuation of their story, just kind of hanging out as very supporting characters in the background of some scenes. It was a cool way to integrate these two movies together.
I mean, you would not believe the things that I've been through. I hardly believe them myself.
In the night, Derek takes the mystery gift and he ends up just throwing it in the trash because he doesn't want to risk another killer toy coming after him. But Lonnie sees Derek throw that gift away, and he immediately goes and unwraps it, and it turns out to be a pair of rollerblades. And while he's putting the rollerblades on, this bully dude walks up, and Lonnie is just immediately a jerk to him, and then he just skates off. It's so funny.
What an asshole.
Hey, what'd you call me? You little shit.
Well, it turns out that Derek was right to throw that gift away, because all of a sudden, the skates come to life. They have little rockets that shoot out of them, and Lonnie goes completely out of control until eventually he ends up riding into the street and he gets hit by a car. And then we get this cut that immediately takes us to the hospital with Lonnie just completely wrapped up. It was funny. It was such a sudden cut. I just burst out laughing. Sarah and Derek end up going straight from the hospital to visit Santa. Sarah is still doing all that she can to get her kid to try and talk, and she's hoping that he'll ask Santa for something, but funnily enough, the strange man that we've been following is currently playing the role of Santa at the mall that they go to, so he starts trying to ask Derek to talk to him, and then when it doesn't work, Sarah just leaves, and he's all sad about it for a second. So this is the first hint that this dude's maybe not a bad guy. He's just trying to figure out something with Derek. Or maybe Sarah, or maybe both. It's a mystery. Ooh. While they're visiting Santa, Pino ends up going over to Derek's house and breaking in. He kind of just walks around and lays on the bed, kind of a Goldilocks sort of situation. He's just being there, trying everything that he can. And when Derek and Sarah get home, Pino jumps out of a closet and scares them, and then he runs back to the toy store. Sarah, of course, immediately goes to the toy store to try and figure out what's going on, and she confronts Pedo, and he says that he had no idea that Pino was there or why he would be there. And he begs Sarah not to call the cops and says that he'll take care of things and make sure that Pino will never do anything like this again. Sarah leaves, And then Pedo ends up going and confronting Pino. They get into a little bit of an argument, and it's clear that there's something more going on. Pedo is drinking really heavily and blaming Pino for something and calling him like a cheap imitation, and Pino's just begging for love and it's not coming to him. And then Pedo ends up hitting Pino and he falls down some stairs and he dies. He totally dies. He's dead. He's a dead guy. That's dead Pino. The next day, Sarah goes to work and leaves Derek home with a babysitter. But the strange man shows up at Sarah's work and chases her through the parking garage. But when he catches her, they just start smooching. The babysitter is able to get Derek to go to sleep, and while the kid is sleeping, the babysitter and her boyfriend decide to get it on. But while they're doing so, Pedo walks into Derek's house, completely dressed up as Santa now, and he leaves a bunch of toys right outside the couple's door. All the toys suddenly attack. It's a pretty fun scene as each toy has a little bit of a different personality. The boyfriend ends up getting killed by this killer race car, and then the babysitter actually doesn't die, but she gets bitten pretty hard by this little monster toy thing, and she's able to run outside just as Sarah gets home. The babysitter tells Sarah that Derek has been kidnapped by Pedo, and Sarah immediately drives off. We also learn here that the strange man is actually Derek's birth father. Like, Sarah married another guy because the strange dude went off to fight in the military, and he wasn't in a financially stable place, so she decided that since she was pregnant, she needed to go with someone who had a little bit of financial stature, but that guy is dead now, so there's no more competition, so the whole family can be together for the first time, finally, I guess. They end up going to the toy store, and inside they find a bunch of files and photos of Pedo and Pino, but it was from decades ago, and Pino looks the exact same, so they start to get a little hint that something strange is going on. They end up finding a trapdoor that goes into a basement for the toy store, and once they go down, Sarah accidentally knocks over a body, and when the hood comes off, it turns out that this was Pedo, and he's actually been dead for some time now. Sarah suddenly gets grabbed by the other Pedo who's standing there still all santed up, but this man suddenly takes his face off and gives it to Sarah. He then grabs another face from off of a shelf and puts it on, and it turns out that this is Pino. He shows his full body, and he's just this puppet-esque looking human creature. It's so cool looking. It's kind of goofy looking, but it's also pretty cool looking. And I'm sure a lot of you guys already put this together, but Pedo and Pino were just plays on Geppetto and Pinocchio. So there were these small hints. I didn't want to bring attention to it to maybe give this away at all. So it's cool. There was a lot of little groundwork already placed to show this twist. So it turns out that Pino has always wanted a family, and a mother specifically, because as Geppetto has been his father, he's also been fairly abusive, and so that's turned him away from wanting a father, so now he wants to try the love of a mother. And he's chosen Sarah to be his mother, but he thinks that Derek will be an issue, so he needs to kill Derek so that he can be the sole child. It's flawless logic. Well, Sarah doesn't take too kindly to this, and she ends up stabbing Pino in the head. This causes him to glitch out a bit, but while he's glitched out, he also becomes far more ready to just kill Derek. He starts stabbing through these Santa bags, apparently having forgotten which one he put Derek in, so he stabs two and toys come out, but he's going to the third one that Derek is in. And just as the knife goes through, Derek actually makes a move, and I really liked this because you don't see the kids attacking very often, especially in this kind of situation. Derek ends up jumping out and grabbing Pino and straddling him long enough for the dad to kick through the door and lob off one of Pino's arms with an axe. Then, the dad gets the crap beaten out of him by this one-armed Pino until right at the last moment, Sarah picks up the axe and is able to cut Pino completely in half. The family are all happily reunited, but then Pino grabs Sarah's leg and she goes stomp mode on his head.
Don't be afraid. It's only a toy, Mommy.
So now Pino's defeated and the family is all happily together, so they leave the toy store. And just before the movie ends, we get this, the false ending, once again, of this little mannequin guy just getting some lightning in his eyes. But that ends the movie. I think Silent Night, Deadly Night 5 was a solid film, and I feel like it was a really fun way to end the series. I'm a pretty big fan of Killer Toys if you haven't noticed a lot of the movies that I've covered in this channel. But I'm also very glad that this movie has such a strong Christmas theme, and the play on Pinocchio was a really clever way to bring Killer Toys into this movie. This one had some great practical effects as well, and one of the stronger stories in general in the series, so all in all, we're giving this one a solid 4 out of 5 killer puppet Santas. So, there you go. All 5 Silent Night, Deadly Night movies. I've known about the first 2 films for a while now, but I had no idea that there was more in this series, and I didn't think that there would be a chance that I would find such fun films just waiting within these expectedly campy 80s and 90s movies. It's definitely easy to say that I was shocked with how much I actually ended up enjoying the Silent Night, Deadly Night series, especially because I was expecting them to start good and then just take a nosedives the way that a lot of movies usually do. You know, like, if you look at the Friday the 13th movies, if you look at the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, like, these films start out great and then they end up tanking, right? But Silent Night, Deadly Night kind of defied that norm. It just seemed to get better as the series went on. I will admit that I definitely have a bias towards the 4th film, but I think regardless of if you enjoy that kind of thing or not, the competency in the storytelling only improves with every single installment, other than the 2nd. That one's the outlier. It's great for other reasons, definitely not storytelling reasons, but it's in its own unique ways. It's a great movie. But yeah, I'd love to know what you guys think of these movies and which other holiday horrors are your favorites. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I've covered tons of other great movies just like these, so if you're looking for something fun to watch, then check out the playlist. Also, a huge thanks to my YouTube members. Thank you guys all so much for the extra support, and I love you. Mwah. But that's it. So, until next time, I hope your holidays are silent, but not deadly. And also not silent. I want them filled with holiday cheer, I guess. But, yeah, happy Christmas. Bye-bye.